Good afternoon, evening. Welcome, everybody. And thank you so very much for joining us tonight for what will be our second observation of World Electrosensitivity or Electrohypersensitivity Day. And we're so honored to have amazing guests with us tonight who will share their experiences. We will hear from legislators, we will hear from physicians, we will hear from attorneys, and perhaps most importantly, the people today who are suffering from electromagnetic illnesses so that we can really understand what they go through on a day-to-day basis to try and survive in this world of electrosmog. So thank you very much. And we're going to start by doing a preview of the trailer for an award-winning short documentary film that has been released literally throughout the world. Can we ask everybody who's not speaking to please mute your audio at this point in the program? Thank you so much. So we're going to do a 2-minute trailer on the award-winning film, Remembering Nearfield. So it'll just take me a second to get my screen share up and do the sound share. And here we go.
I am an electrosensitive person and like to tell you about EHS. Electrosensitive people are just like everybody else. Over the course of time, it became more and more clear that something was interfering with my life. At the office, I got trouble thinking, so I tried to work at home, in the attic. But there the problems were the same. Downstairs was the only place where I could get things done. I couldn't see that these wireless developments could be the cause of my health problems. I didn't even think things like that were possible. In 2001, I had to give up. I was exhausted. I had terrible headaches and my body ached everywhere. I got several infections at the same time. I took all the necessary steps to recover but wasn't able to. And in the end, I lost my job. I could no longer take in any information. I couldn't bear noise nor light. I always at the same step on the stairs, my legs seemed to refuse to bear me. And there was no place in the house left where it felt right anymore. A cage of Faraday was built around my bed. And in that cage, I finally was able to sleep again. I have to stay in the safe parts of my shielded house. And I can't use much electricity. Electrosensitive people are just like everybody else.
Okay, so when we send out our video, in the description, we will include a link to the full feature of that. It's actually not a full feature film, it's a short. I believe it's only 9 minutes long, but it's very powerful and it is picking up accolades all over the world. So please do share that with others. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce our co-host for this evening, Courtney Gilardi, and there over her shoulder is her lovely daughter, Amelia, neither of whom ever imagined they would become household names in so many homes across our country and across the world. But we are eternally grateful, Courtney and Amelia, and to the rest of your family, for the time you have taken to work on the wireless radiation issue. None of us ever imagined this is where we'd be spending our time. And you inspire us every day because you don't back down. We know it's not easy and we know some days are just completely awful, but here you are and you keep coming back and we love you for it. And we love to hear what it is that you have to say for us today. And then you will go ahead and introduce the remainder of our speakers. And I'll be back here doing the little Wizard of Oz behind the scenes. So Courtney, thank you so much for being with us. and I will step away and hand it over to you. Thank you so much.
Cece, thank you so much. And I want to thank every single one of you, all of our distinguished guest speakers, and each of you who took the time out of your Friday to be here with us in order to honor and recognize World Electromagnetic Sensitivity, or EMS Day. EMS is also known as EHS, electromagnetic hypersensitivity. It's also called microwave illness, and you may hear these terms used interchangeably tonight. Well, tonight we celebrate the strength and resiliency of this courageous electrosensitive community around the world, and here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we also acknowledge that EMS is serious. It requires urgency, care, attention. It can be life-threatening, isolating, and downright scary. To many of those who suffer without support, it can feel hopeless and helpless. We want to share the message, you are not alone. And together we are making efforts and actions to make a difference. Those who suffer struggle not just with electromagnetic sensitivity, but with a need for safe, accessible, and affordable housing, healthcare covered by insurance with trained medical practitioners knowledgeable about this condition, and access to legal services, as all too often the Americans with Disabilities Act recognition is in paper only. And often legal support is needed to achieve an accommodation that allows a citizen to stay safely in their home, or maintain their job, or attend a school, or visit the State House or Town Hall to make a public comment. As we spoke about in last year's forum, Voices of the Invisible Made Visible, EMS is an environmentally induced illness that can be prevented and often improved by avoiding or reducing exposure to electromagnetic fields. But avoiding this exposure in an increasingly densified world is not an easy thing to do. And we often cannot do it alone. We need the support not just from our families, friends, neighbors, from our doctors, our scientists, and subject matter experts who are here today, but from our legislators and our community leaders who are also here, our school administrators, our volunteer planning boards, our city councils, and our town selectmen. No one should have to choose between their home or their health, their job or their health, their school or their health, when these levels of man-made radio frequency radiation can be lowered, mitigated, or removed. And yet these are the choices that myself, my children, and those in the electrosensitive community must face every single day. But we shouldn't have to. No one should suffer, and no one should have to suffer alone. And to this end, we have been working tirelessly with our legislators and leaders and lawyers to make efforts and take tangible actions on behalf of those sick and suffering, including our neighbors here in Shacktown. Our Honorable Senator Paul Mark and those in his office have become incredible allies and advocates. Not only were they knowledgeable about this condition before we even reached out, they are working on our behalf, sponsoring bills and taking action. I would like to thank and welcome all of our distinguished guests and speakers and each of you. I am so grateful to all of you here and all of you listening to this video. With that, I will turn it over to Senator Paul Mark for his opening comments this evening. Thank you for being here, Senator Mark.
Thank you, Courtney. Thank you for having me. I appreciate being asked to participate. It seems like the Berkshires is ground zero. I hate to use that term for all of this activity right now, representing 57 cities and towns in Berkshire, Franklin, Hampshire, and Hampden County. We've been seeing a lot of activity recently in terms of local communities, trying to find out, I think, more information. And me and Representative Tricia Farley-Bouvier of Pittsfield have both been assigned to the new Committee on Advanced Technology, Cybersecurity, and the Internet. And I think that's a really good place for legislators to take an active role in just trying to understand what is going on as technology changes. Technology is changing quickly, and it has been for the last 25 years, and I imagine it will be into the future. And when we talk about AI coming around the corner, we talk about 5G, and eventually it's going to be a 6G. I think it's never a bad thing for the public to ask for some information, for cities and towns specifically, to try to find out, what's coming into our communities. In the Berkshire specifically, we've dealt with big businesses, international businesses that have come in, have told us things are safe, and then have left us high and dry with a lot of cleanup to do after the fact. And we want to avoid that before the fact, as we watch what's changing and watch how technology gets more and more into each of our lives every single day. So I've been happy to partner with a number of people on this call. I come from a technology and telecommunications background. Before I was elected to the state legislature, I worked at Bell Atlantic and then Verizon for years on wireline phones, on wireline telecommunications. And coming out of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Union, there had been a lot of research and a lot of activity suggesting that line technicians working on high tension lines were more prone to health issues, were more prone to cancers that aren't found anywhere. So when I find people in the cities and towns I represent worried about such things, I think it's our duty to, be there for them, be there to partner and try to make sure that there's just awareness and that no one's caught by surprise and that we have all the facts. So I'm grateful for the invitation, grateful to work with Cecilia and Courtney. And I saw Nina on the Zoom out there somewhere who's also been a frequent contributor by email with me, and happy to kick off World EHS Day Massachusetts. And I don't know if I'm supposed to introduce her or if Courtney's going to do it, but I know there's a video coming from my colleague, Rep. Tricia Farley-Bouvier, who is actually the chair of that committee on the House side. And I know she's also extremely willing to participate and partner and make sure that, we're getting all the information we need. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Senator Mark, for being here, for those wonderful comments, for your support of the health and safety of every single one of your constituents here in your communities that you represent and serve. We all love technology. We use it, we rely on it. We're using it here tonight. We just want to make sure that we implement it in safer ways, and that we are hearing correct information and that people get the support in their communities that they need. So thank you for being a leader. Thank you for all that you do for us here in Shacktown and all your communities. And with that, thank you. We're going to introduce the video from Tricia Farley-Bouvier on the House bill that she has sponsored to record the number of people in the Commonwealth who have electromagnetic sensitivity. There's also a component to this bill that includes education and awareness, which we all need. We were very fortunate. Our doctors were knowledgeable about the condition. Not everybody has access to getting a medical diagnosis or doing that in a timely way. You'll hear from some of those stories tonight. So with that, I want to thank Senator Paul Mark, and thank Tricia Farley-Bouvier, our state representative and neighbor. And here's her video.
Thank you for inviting me to speak to you today about a bill that I filed with my neighbor and my constituent, Courtney Gilardi. H2158 would recognize electromagnetic sensitivity as a medical condition and require public health officials to collect data of both its incidence and prevalence. My community of Pittsfield has been in regular contact with me to express their concerns over EMS, including their own personal health struggles. We cannot address any public health concerns without information and data, and this is exactly what H2158 would do. The Massachusetts legislative session is still in its early stages. We have until February of 2024 to continue to advocate for this bill. It's really good news that this bill has already had a hearing with the Public Health Committee back in May. As impacted individuals, the very best thing you can do is be in touch with your own state rep and state senator to advocate for this bill, telling your personal stories. Thank you for your advocacy on this topic. This is exactly how legislative change happens.
Okay, we're recording now.
So thank you to our state representative, Tricia Farley-Bouvier, for sponsoring that bill. Thank you to each and every one of you who testified or submitted written comments on that bill. And as our state rep says, it's still open to do so. So if you are here in Massachusetts, we can provide the contact details of the people to reach out to. Really sharing your stories, people hearing your voice is so important to this process. And with that, I want to welcome Dr. David Carpenter, who is one of the subject matter experts who heard our voices and responded to our call to help. Dr. Carpenter was one of the earliest physicians who reached out to Mayor Tyre in the city of Pittsfield when we became ill and wrote a letter on our behalf asking for intervention and assistance because of the reality of electromagnetic sensitivity and the symptoms that people experience. You shared science, and you also sat on our panel along with Dr. Paul Heroux to our Board of Health. Both of you have been incredible resources and experts. Dr. Magda Havas, who's here tonight as well, I see. I want to thank you, Dr. David Carpenter, for being with us this evening.
Thank you, Courtney. Thank you very much. I am a public health physician, and one of my jobs is to identify human disease that results from environmental exposures. EHS or EMS, however you want to describe it, is a real disease. It may not be recognized by many in the medical community, but studies that have been done that are well designed to determine whether an electrosensitive person can respond with symptoms to fields when they're on, but not respond when they're off. Those studies have been done, and in the well-designed studies, they demonstrate clearly that individuals that are electrosensitive, not everybody is, but individuals that are, respond to exposure to radio frequency fields. Now, not everybody develops blatant symptoms, but the more I am involved in this area, I think everybody is electrosensitive to some degree. Why certain people are much more sensitive than others is still not very clear. Even there, we're beginning to understand what the mechanisms behind the generation of these symptoms are due to. And they appear to be an unusually reactive response to what we call as free radicals or reactive oxygen species. And this is promising because up until now, as Courtney's already said, the only treatment that we know for an electrosensitive person is to find ways to reduce their exposure. Now, there are many diseases for which we don't have good treatments to prevent the symptoms from occurring every time you're exposed to a contaminant. Think about poison ivy, for example. But with electrosensitive people, we have no documented treatments. There still is the major problem of the ignorance of the medical profession. When electrosensitive people go to see their GP, usually they send to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist. That's totally inappropriate. What we need is more research on the causes, the mechanisms. Now, we have overwhelming research of health hazards from exposure to radio frequency electromagnetic fields. The evidence for cancer is just overwhelming, in spite of the fact that there are industry-supported people that will make denials of that, but it's not the case. That evidence is overwhelming. We have very strong evidence for reduction of fertility in both men and women, particularly in men. We have increasingly evidence that excessive exposure reduces cognitive function, and this is a problem. It's probably a component of the electrohypersensitivity syndrome, but with electrohypersensitivity, we have symptoms of fatigue. Would people please mute their phones if they're not speaking? We have symptoms of fatigue, headache, general being incapacitated. I will never forget walking along the sidewalk with an electrosensitive person who had recovered by reducing exposure for a prolonged period of time. And every now and then she would say, there's a cell tower here, I can feel it. We'd look up and there's a cell tower. We'd go for another couple blocks. Oh, there's another cell tower. And yes, it's there. This is a real disease. And in people that are severely affected, it is absolutely incapacitating. The only treatment that we have at present is to reduce your exposure for prolonged periods of time. And then often that allows people to resume a somewhat normal lifestyle. The mechanisms behind this, as I said, we have insights. We're beginning to understand what's going on. We certainly do not fully understand it. Now, one of the big concerns, I with a colleague published a paper several years ago showing that in about 2006, there started to be an exponential rise in exposure of all of us to radio frequency fields. And that's continued. The rollout of 5G makes things worse. You can't go into a Starbucks or a McDonald's without being exposed to Wi-Fi, especially in urban areas. There projection equipment on top of big buildings everywhere. So the number of people that develop electrohypersensitivity or electromagnetic sensitivity is almost certainly increasing. That's not well documented. We need to find funding for research on this syndrome. There is effectively no funding from the US government. There's very little funding from other governments, although there's some in Europe. There are lots of things we don't know. What we do know, electrohypersensitivity, electromagnetic sensitivity, microwave illness is a real disease. It affects real people in ways that are harmful to their health, and we've got to take action.
Unmute and unvideo, both of them, or I can do video now, right?
Mute yourself.
Please mute. Thank you. I think that concludes my comments.
Thank you so much, Dr. David Carpenter, for all of your support, for your help here in Pittsfield, for being an advocate and ally, somebody who is educating, and for everyone in this electrosensitive community. We so appreciate you. Thank you for your time this evening. And with that, I would like to introduce our attorney, Attorney Scott McCollough. We'll let Cece, can't quite see Scott yet. Hopefully we'll see Scott in just a moment. Let's see. There we go. Attorney Scott McCollough, we want to thank you for everything that you have done for our Pittsfield community from the very beginning, when we learned that we were not the only people who were going through this, and you helped back then and then with the cease and desist, and you've been helping this community for a long time now. So we want to introduce Attorney Scott McCollough.
Hi, everyone. Good to see everyone. And I know many of the folks that are in the lineup today, and I hope to someday meet everyone that's in the audience. Before I get started, I want to give a shout out to the folks in Wyandotte, Michigan, and attorneys Castmore and Berg. They got themselves quite the dogfight. The folks there aren't aware of this issue. I urge you to look it up. They managed to hold a temporary restraining order yesterday against T-Mobile in federal court, and now have a pretty bruising pleading cycle all the way through to the end of the month trying to get their case back to state court. I'm going to ask everybody to all send luck and hope their way. I've been asked to briefly discuss two matters, where we are with the FCC case, and then very briefly Pittsfield as a result of last week's decision by our state court judge. As you all know, in August 2021, the Court of Appeals for the DC Circuit ruled that the FCC had failed to consider and adequately address the overwhelming scientific and medical evidence that was in the record that its 1996 exposure guidelines were outdated and ineffective. The court told the FCC that it must reassess emissions compliance testing procedures for mobile devices, RF radiation impact on children, including long-term exposure in light of the increasing wireless ubiquity and technological developments. And 3, RF radiation environmental impacts. In other words, what it's doing to the birds, bees, and the trees. Soon after the decision became final, Environmental Health Trust, who was a co-petitioner along with my client, Children's Health Defense, asked the FCC to comply with the mandate. They did not. The Environmental Working Group filed a petition asking for new guidelines with a special emphasis on protecting children in June of 2022. Still nothing. Children's Health Defense filed a petition to proceed and honor the court mandate in early April of this year. Still no response. Now, the FCC in a couple of different places, the chairwoman to Congress and the FCC in court in a different matter earlier this week, is basically telling everyone it doesn't plan to do anything until later, until 2024, if not 2025. The Council on Environmental Quality, or CEQ, is undergoing a revision of its National Environmental Policy Act rules. They plan to update and amend those rules, phase 2 of this process. And the commission is telling everyone we're going to wait until the phase 2 rules. This is clearly a stalling tactic, however. The CEQ rules, the phase 1 rules, already require the commission to act. From what I hear, the commission intends to just ignore that, perhaps hoping that CEQ is going to grant them an extension. More important, the DC Circuit 2021 decision was not based on the National Environmental Policy Act. In fact, we raised a NEPA challenge and they rejected it. The court's mandate is separate and independent from the NEPA rules. And we believe the commission needs to quit stalling and get moving. People are getting hurt every day. We cannot wait another 2 years for the commission to start a proceeding that may last several more before there is meaningful reform. Everyone needs to keep writing the FCC, telling them to honor the court mandate. We need local, state, and federal elected officials to write and demand immediate action, like some already have. It does make a difference when the public calls for action. Speak out and ask your elected officials to do the same. Now, on Pittsfield. As most of you know, my Children's Health Defense has stepped in to help Courtney and her family. Another family, the Heroux's, the Markhams, and Elaine Ireland, all of them who live in Shacktown there in Pittsfield. The Board of Health initially ordered Verizon to come in and show cause why it should not be required to shut down the tower that was making everyone there in Shacktown sick. But it was then, because of political reasons and some other reasons, forced to withdraw that order. Our lawsuit in state court says that the board was wrongly bullied into rescinding the show cause order, and them pulling it down was illegal in many ways. We asserted that the Mirin solicitor went way out of bounds in their efforts to help Verizon. We argued that some of their illicit actions violated state ethics. The defendants filed a motion to dismiss that case in full. The court ruled last week, and it did strike 2 of our claims. It says that other state agencies, the State Lawyer Ethics and State Ethics Commissions for Government Officials, have exclusive jurisdiction over claim violations of state ethics rules. As a result, we won't be able to seek a ruling that the Mirin city attorney violated very specific rules, and that those state ethics violations alone justify reversal of the decision to rescind the show cause order. The good news is that we can still complain about the underlying actions that they took. We can say that those actions were illegal for other reasons beyond the ethics rules themselves. We just can't tie our claimed legal error to those specific rules. So our case is going to go forward. We're going to be building the administrative record. We're going to be briefing. We're going to be arguing. We hope to get a decision sometime, perhaps by the end of the year. Overall, this is a win from last week. The court did not dismiss the case, that state law, all of it, is entirely preempted under the Communications Act and FCC rules. We're going to be able to go forward. The court's going to look at the evidence, and it's going to decide whether the board truly does have the power and ability to execute its state law duties to protect residents' health and safety, like Courtney and her family, the Markhams, and all the other residents in Pittsfield. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Attorney McCollough, for not just the efforts to the FCC to remand those standards, which are taking forever and will not immediately help us, but for the immediate and direct action of your advocacy through this litigation to help us get safely home. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
With that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Lisa Nagy from Martha's Vineyard. Dr. Nagy has been involved in this movement for a long time, and we look forward to hearing about her experience and efforts here in Massachusetts with the Medical Society and all the work that she has done on behalf of those with this environmentally induced illness.
Courtney, are you talking to me? All I can see is your lips moving. I can't hear anything, but if I'm supposed to speak, I will start talking. Is it okay?
It is Dr. Lisa.
You can hear me. Can you not?
I can hear you.
I don't know what happened to my volume, but anyway, I'm ready to go. So
Thank you.
Sorry. I am, start my video. I'll do that as well. I hid myself for a sec. Okay, there I am. So I'm a physician who became sick with environmental illness years ago. And it took about 10 years to recover. And now I won't stop teaching this in the ideas medical school to physicians and the public. And we got a presence in Congress on veterans' health because they're toxic as well. And they have sort of the same syndrome. We've been on some popular television series like Netflix called Afflicted, and Dr. Phil and the Doctors, and other television shows that have featured in environmentally ill people who have electrosensitivity. And each of these venues have come up because I've spoken in a government meeting and then somebody sees me and interviews me for a newspaper or magazine. I went to Cornell Medical School, and at Cornell, we were not taught about this at all. We never learned about even fibromyalgia, chemical sensitivity, or chronic fatigue. I was trained in emergency medicine, and I became ill from a toxic, like a moldy house in California. And the damage to the membranes of the body led to chemical sensitivity and electrical sensitivity, as it does in about 15% of the chemically sensitive. And again, how would you know how to mitigate it if you've never heard of it? And you wouldn't even know to get away from like the 4 computer monitors that I had. 70% of women over 40 are mildly chemically sensitive, yet all men in medicine deny it completely. So that's really the crux of the problem. Women get it, men deny it. And I was speaking to Blair Grubb, who's a cardiologist in the area of postural tachycardia, and he said there's a real misogynistic, he said this in a number of newspapers, problem in that postural tachycardia from environmental illness is denied by men in medicine, and women are getting it and they're not putting any research money into it. So I took 10 years to recover. I was on SSI. I now have a medical center and I treat people. So it's possible to get well. And I learned this from Bill Ray in Texas. And now I'm doing stuff in the Medical Society. I'm a delegate in the Massachusetts Medical Society. And we had a resolution on EMF a year ago, and it passed. Whether cell phones, Wi-Fi, 5G, whether they're safe, whether we have done any research on them. And the answer is no, to the extent that traditional physicians don't believe that there is data. And so actually the physicians in our medical society decided we need more information and the information should be looked at, and we should change practices of use. The other interesting thing is I had a resolution just this last month on postural tachycardia, which is one of the effects of being exposed to some of these toxins in EMF, is the fast heartbeat on standing. And because COVID can cause this, mold can cause this, getting a smart meter can cause this, POTS, or postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, is one of the most important things to study and emphasize and get people to think about, because it's in cardiology and neurology. It's an accepted condition. So now we have tens of millions of people with it, says the Washington Post, and nobody's ready for it. And so that's what my resolution was about just recently. There are too many struggling patients that can't stand up comfortably. They get crossing of their arms, pretzeling of their legs, then they get anxious and panic attack. So you can see there are mental health effects of these exposures because of the physiologic changes in the body. So midodrine is the drug of choice, and regular doctors should be prescribing it. And that was my resolution, that regular doctors need to be ready for this onslaught of tens of millions. The problem is that kids and adults have this on Martha's Vineyard from the Moldy School, and the heart rates are 140 instead of 72. And the kids are using drugs, caffeine and nicotine, cocaine and amphetamines, instead of getting midodrine. So if we gave them appropriate treatment and then detoxify them and turn off the Wi-Fi and got the schools to be, they're all being rebuilt here because of the mold and issues like this. But they don't really want to acknowledge that they have a physiologic problem by checking the standing heart rate. So I don't want to go over, my 2-minute limit, but I'm saying that the science changes quickly, but doctors don't learn it quickly. And they need to be able to make management decisions faster than waiting 20 years. So remember Semmelweis washing his hands between autopsy and delivering babies so that the woman wouldn't get a uterine infection. He was ostracized, and it took decades, if not 100 years, for policy to change on delivering babies. The same thing now. We need to use the precautionary principle. If we don't know if something harmful, presume that it is. And as the data is coming out clinically, listen to patients. Don't wait for some study to occur. If we have clinical information now, listen to the people who have the problem and believe them. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lisa. We so appreciate you being here, and what powerful words. Listen and believe people when they tell you that this is their experience. Thank you for being with us tonight. And next
Thanks.
up, I'd like to introduce my daughter, Amelia, who needs no introduction. Here she is.
Good evening. My name is Amelia, and I'm 15 years old. I've lost my home, my health, and my neighborhood to a high RF environment when a cell tower went up. I've been speaking and advocating for disability rights, protections, and accommodations for those with electrosensitivity for the last several years. I've had the honor of working with legislators and leaders on this issue, and many remarkable people who are amazing and treated my family and I with dignity and respect. They have taken remarkable action to help us get home and keep us safe. Our Board of Health, Attorney McCollough, Dr. Carpenter, the Massachusetts Health Boards, and countless others are working tirelessly on our behalf and have shown us we are not collateral damage. Other communities have not always been so friendly or open to the idea that those with this invisible illness matter. All too often we hear stories and recently experienced for ourselves that when people are impacted by wireless radiation and speak up, they can be ignored, turned away, or sometimes worse, discriminated against and bullied. People in the electrosensitive community need to hear, we see you, we care about you, you matter, you belong here. Because when these sentences are expressed, you can have a life-saving effect on people who are vulnerable to bullying's most dangerous outcomes: depression, isolation, anxiety, fear, and suicide. In our public schools, inclusion is mandated by law, but meaningful education about disabilities, including electrosensitivity, goes beyond legal compliance. Creating an environment where all young people feel represented, included, accommodated, and valued is a necessity that benefits the better world we want to see for everyone. As my mom recently wrote to my school administrators, we know that sharing our stories and accepting each other's differences is part of building an inclusive culture that supports diversity, equity, and inclusion. It should be our leaders' goals to create a culture and community of belonging where everyone feels cared for, welcome, and empowered to share their experiences and have the equitable treatment they need to be successful. We all rise when we lift each other, so thank you everybody here for lifting us.
Thank you, Amelia, for sharing your story. With that, I want to try and invite Virginia Rosen to speak. She's having some technical difficulties. I think Cece's going to make her co-host and see if we can get Virginia. And if everyone else can just mute, I'm hearing just a little background information, a little background sound from someone. Let's see if we can get Virginia. Virginia, can you hear us?
Okay, Courtney, I have a statement that Virginia prepared, and perhaps if it's okay with her, I could go ahead and share some of the comments that she sent in to us. If you'll give me, well, why don't we go ahead to the next speaker, who is Godelieve Richards, and Virginia, I will pull that up and we will come back to that next. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. So we'd like to welcome Godelieve Richards to share her story.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and move on from Godelieve? I don't see her yet in the room. So that will bring us to Dr. Jodie MacDonald.
Hi, how are you today?
We're well. Thank you for being here with us tonight.
Good. So I'm Dr. Jodie MacDonald. I'm a holistic doctor from Dracut, which is the northeastern part of the state. I've actually been researching this issue for some time. I've seen towers go up. I've seen the antennas go up. I've seen facial recognition. The street lights with 5G go up. There is a water tower 2 streets up from me that has a humongous tower on top of it. And then I have a smart meter on my home that I didn't know was changed. It was when I started researching that I went outside and I was like, wow, where did this come from? So I have ringing in my ears. It's not tinnitus. I've had tinnitus since I was a child due to an ear injury, but the frequencies are different. I get heart palpitations, fatigue, especially at home. I get extremely fatigued when I'm at home. Anxiety, panic attacks, nervouses, as well as other symptoms of EHS. And being a holistic doctor, there are actually a lot of tools that I have. It's just the frequencies are so strong. But I also have dizziness and some memory issues. I feel the frequencies mostly at night, and the other symptoms come and go throughout the day. Sometimes if I'm near a tower or antenna, I can feel it. I'm an energy worker, so I feel a lot of different types of energies. And I can also have a panic attack because my heartbeat goes off kilter. It's almost like what they call atrial fib, something like that. Again, sometimes if I'm near a tower, it can go off. I can feel the differences in the energetic frequencies in the air. Insomnia most nights. I have trouble not only falling asleep, but staying asleep. You know, again, even with the tools that I have that can help naturally, I still have symptoms. How does it affect my life activities? I don't go very far because what if my heartbeat goes off kilter and doesn't go back to normal? I have known people that that can happen that have electromagnetic frequency sensitivity to it. I don't want to drive really far again, because it doesn't go back to I get so fatigued sometimes that I can't focus on anything, or don't have any oomph to do anything. I don't exercise because, again, if my heart goes really, really fast and doesn't go back down to normal. And besides, there are antennas on all the telephone poles in my town. It's kind of ridiculous, the amount of towers and antennas that are here. I believe there's 300 within a 3-mile radius. What do I want people to do? I want people to be educated about this. Take down the towers in the residential areas. I've seen them on top of apartment buildings. I want them to recognize the dangers of these things. Stop all the satellites, the 5Gs, the EMFs, and the debris that makes our lives toxic. Again, I did a presentation on this subject not that long ago to a group, and I found a picture that if you actually saw the electromagnetic frequencies in the air, because again, they're invisible, you wouldn't be able to see 2 feet in front of you. So, again, I have many tools, but a lot of those help, but it doesn't take it away. So.
Jodie, thank you so much for sharing your story with us tonight. I think many of us feel that same way. We have a lot of tools, but it doesn't take it away unless we get ourselves into a low RF EMF environment. When we were living next to the cell tower, we were taking ibuprofen, Tylenol, Motrin, Tums, Pepto-Bismol, anti-itch cream, everything to deal with these symptoms that are just unbearable. And the thing that helped us the most was moving away from the source of it. And we are running out of low EMF places to go. And up next, we have Godelieve Richard, who she and her husband, John, are creating a low EMF sanctuary for people to go. So Godelieve, welcome. And I'll just ask you to unmute. Thank you for being here with us tonight. Godelieve, can you hear us? Oh, we just can't hear you. Oops, we might have to come back to Godelieve.
I'll go try to give her a hand. If you go to someone else, I'll go try to fix it.
Oh, John, you're here too. Thank you. We'll get you to speak too.
Volume, maybe.
Oh, Godelieve, try talking again. I think we just heard you. Oh, we heard someone.
I'll go fix it, and then you can come back to her.
Thank you. Let's see if we can move on to Leonore then. Leonore, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Oh, wonderful. Well, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. We look forward to hearing your
It's my
story,
pleasure.
Leonore.
Yes, thank you also. I testify on behalf of EHS Prevention and Freedom of Speech about its existence. I enjoy good health outdoors, but experience inside my apartment physical pain throughout the body, heart palpitations, weakened blood vessels, and loss of balance. My symptoms are due to involuntary exposure to electrosmog that originates from A, extremely high RFs from the bases of my next door neighbor's cordless phones. I used to think it was their Wi-Fi. It was not, as you hear. B, electromagnetic fields at floor level caused by the building's electrical infrastructure located directly beneath my apartment. Regarding DRFs, my meter had detected very high levels originated from my neighbor's apartment. I attempted to speak with them and offered to pay for remediation. They were unreceptive and reported me to the local housing authority. I was accused of disturbing the peace and being a public nuisance. A written notice states, should I speak again to my neighbors about Wi-Fi, it is cause for eviction. A Massachusetts renters organizations mediated but did not object to the clause. That was last year. My primary physician does not relate to my health concerns and writes it is fibromyalgia into my chart. Nurses performing routine elder check-ins for Commonwealth Care Alliance they work for record my concerns. Commonwealth Care Alliance, however, never has followed up. I did. On May 26, 2023, an expert in building biology surveyed the apartment. His sophisticated meters confirmed extreme RF levels from cordless phones. The meters discovered also EMF fields throughout the apartment originating from the electrical infrastructure in the basement. And I called afterwards the building management that measurements were taken. This is one of the municipalities. It's not the town I live in, but there's a housing authority that is responsible for the house I live in, and there are many of those in the state of Massachusetts. The manager declined to act as liaison regarding the cordless phone, which is easy. I offered to pay for it, and we would have a massive remediation. She offered that the basement could be evaluated after receiving instructions from the Massachusetts Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. The abbreviation is EOHLC. That agency specializes in housing to stabilize the economic vitality of Massachusetts. Health is not on their radar, however, yet. EHS is a collective reality check, especially economies cannot afford to ignore it. Thank you.
Leonore, thank you so much for sharing your story and your the issue with public housing and the Wi-Fi and the frequencies that come in and your journey with it. So thank you for being brave and speaking out and sharing. We really appreciate you, Leonore.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you also to everybody.
And with that, I think we're going to try and come back to Godelieve and John, who are doing amazing work with Piti Theater and Hilltown Health.
Can you hear me this time?
We can. Success.
This was a little stressful. Okay. So my name is Godelieve Richard, and I make strange faces because of movements that I cannot control. So you're going to see me do things, but I can't control that. Okay, so I've been experiencing severe symptoms from electromagnetic pollution for 13 years. Please help those of us who are sick. Please help our environment, which is our well of life. Some people don't know where to live. It is so polluted everywhere. Many people don't know that the symptoms that they experience are due to electromagnetic pollution, insomnia, neurological problems, agitation, memory problems, etc. It is odorless and invisible, but it is everywhere. Please learn about this subject and help people like me be taken seriously. The physical and psychological sufferings are unbearable. I dream of having places to live without any wireless waves. Sadly, they don't exist. My house has low levels of wireless, but it is still too much pollution for me. Electricity and corded internet and phones are the future unless the waves are made healthy for life on Earth. Wireless is killing our wildlife. I advise that you work towards low wireless in some places and no wireless white zones in other regions. This would greatly help the well-being of our children and teens who have such a hard time with this pollution. I am not talking about the content of the devices, which can also be bad for them. I'm talking about the invisible waves. people could choose to live in wireless environment or not, at least there would be a choice. I am asking you to be wise. Money can be made with healthy products. And anyways, money cannot be eaten. Once we have only money left to eat, it is not going to be joyful or helpful. So I just added also that electricity is also unhealthy, but it is not as invasive as wireless. If we don't want it, we can stop it. And thank you for the opportunity to express myself.
Godelieve, thank you so much for being here, for offering those comments. We know that John, during the pandemic, made an incredible film, Canary in the Gold Mine, and really featured your story and the path for you getting a diagnosis and your illness and what it was like for you and your family. And we want to thank you for sharing that story and then sharing your story through Canary with the entire world. That was an acclaimed film, won many awards, had wonderful screenings. So thank you. It's a deeply personal, to share that much with the entire world. And we do it in the hopes that it makes it better for everyone. And so if John is here, we'd like to let him speak for 2 minutes. This is Jonathan Mirin. Thank you so much for being here and speaking tonight.
Thanks for having me, Courtney, and for having Godelieve. Yeah, in case there are people who are watching this who haven't seen Canary, I thought maybe just to start with a 1-minute teaser, just to give a little taste of that film, which is we're still submitting to film festivals. It's getting some traction in regular sort of mainstream film festivals, which is good because more people see it. And let's see if I can.
John, I have it queued up here. Would you like me to play it for you?
Sure, that would be great.
Okay.
Thanks, Cece. You might not know the story behind the phrase canary in the coal mine.
She was Swiss and still is.
People call it electrical sensitivity or EHS or microwave, like people getting sick from wireless. The coal miners would take the canaries down with them in cages. There's the round, the ground, the sirloin, the chuck, the rib, the tenderloin, the T-bone, and that is just for starters.
We have to investigate.
So there really is no research ongoing. We're kind of blind here, so far as health and safety is concerned.
And isn't this the kind of thing that your child develops problems from, your chronically ill mother and your depressed father?
The air had become too toxic.
What are we going to do now?
And it was time to get out. Thanks for playing that, Cece.
You betcha.
So, yeah, the latest news with Canary, we brought it back to DC. We brought it down to DC for the DC Independent Film Festival, where we had a nice event in collaboration with Environmental Health Trust. And then someone we met there who was on the panel, Joe Sandry, who's the president of the National Association of Spectrum Managers, which is a sort of telecom embedded organization that helps telecom figure out issues around spectrum, invited us back because he understands a lot about the health impacts and is trying to create a better situation for everyone. And so we were able to screen it, not the whole thing, but show good chunks of it to that group. And those presentations are going to be available on their website, and I'll make them available when they're ready. So that was interesting. It's just interesting to think about ways we can reach out directly to people who work with telecom, because obviously some of them kind of get what's going on, and some of them are looking for what Joe describes as on-ramps for good behavior. So it's important to remember that. And if there's anyone from California on this call, we're sort of starting to organize with some organizations out in California, a sort of late September tour for Canary. And the last thing I'll say, I don't want to take up too much time, is if there are people on this call from like Franklin County, Hampshire County, Hampden County, so the Connecticut River Valley part of Massachusetts, we're we're trying to gather more people on the Hilltown Health list so we can have a better chance of doing things like creating the first EHS accommodation in a public library, and things like that. So, but for that, we just need to grow numbers. Not that I'm looking for more people to get sick, but just trying to find people who either know they're being affected or just concerned about the issue. So the sort of advocacy group is hilltownhealth.org. I'll put that in the chat. And our website for the theater company, we started creating EMF kind of aware shows in 2012 with To Be or Not To Be, is ptco.org. And I'll put those in the chat. And the last thing I'll put in the chat is a sneak preview of a new film we made while we were in DC called Free the FCC for You and Me, which is just a 3-minute short that we created in the front of the Capitol, where I played an FCC scientist, and another actress played a protester who's been trying to get Congress to intervene because, as most of us know, there was a ruling in the federal court, thanks to Scott McCollough and others, that required the FCC to look at the evidence. So it's sort of a little skit about that hopefully will lighten some of your days. Thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing the incredible efforts, both from Hilltown Health and PT Theater, making the films that are fun and enjoyable and engaging and devastating and bring you through the whole story in such a personal glimpse into your private life and into your own lived experience with electromagnetic sensitivity and trying to make the world a better, safer, greener, whiter, white zone place for people who are electrosensitive to be able to live and hopefully heal and thrive. So thank you, John and Godelieve, for being here and doing the work that you do in the world.
You're welcome, Courtney. Thanks for organizing this. I'm seeing in the chat, maybe I'll send this to Cece and she can forward it to everyone.
Beautiful, thank you. And with that, I'd like to welcome let's see, we have Nina Anderson first and then Laurie. So let's see if we can find Nina Anderson.
I'm here.
Wonderful, Nina. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time and your sharing your experience.
There you go. Okay. Okay. I'm president of the Scientific Alliance for Education, and that's the group that Cece's Massachusetts for Safe Technology is under. And we were actually successful at getting the conditional bylaws passed in Sheffield and Great Barrington to curb 5G, at least for now. So I've minimized my own EHS symptoms in my home by having landlines, limiting my cell phone use, wearing this vest here that's made of EMF protection material, which is really good, and I have a headband too. And other methods I use, because I do some healthy house inspections and I go in there and I meter people's houses and give them ideas on what they can do. But I'm also a commercial pilot, and I've run safety seminars on pilot education for the Federal Aviation Administration Wings program. And I also had an article published in Plane and Pilot magazine recently on the potential hazards to pilots of Wi-Fi in the cockpit, something people don't realize that when they go fly that they're getting affected by. It's been well established that EMS from wireless devices, including the cockpit electronics, can impair the brain neurotransmitter transmissions. Now, if a pilot uses their cell phone shortly before flight, testing has shown their cognitive abilities are diminished. Should there be a breakdown in the thought process at critical times of flight, such as an emergency situation during takeoff or landing, the outcome of the flight may be compromised. Many aircraft incidents or accidents have been attributed to pilot error. Now, I've been working with the NTSB and the FAA to consider causal factor being cell phone and Wi-Fi usage prior to the accident. So far, they're ignoring us, of course. Passengers are instructed to turn off their cell phones. You know, when you fly, they say, please turn off your cell phone, prior to takeoff. So they won't interfere with the navigation or communication, but you have a cockpit full of electronics. And the pilots are using their cell phones and they have their iPads and they're all connected wirelessly. So it could be that their brains might go on vacation just at the wrong time. So we're really doing a lot of advocacy in this respect, as well as helping support the local towns as well. So what we want to do is we want an additional risk factor be added to this, to the NTSB and the FAA's look at accidents or incidents about the pilot's neural response to those frequencies, because we all know that we can be affected by it. But when a pilot's in the cockpit, and if you're sitting in the back, that's not too cool to think that the pilot's sitting in there and he's getting affected by the Wi-Fi when you might have your cell phone on in the back of the airplane. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina, so much for sharing your experience as a commercial pilot, and to understand that those electromagnetic frequencies, they affect everyone. In those high environments, there are issues, and thank you for working with those government agencies to try and make it safer for everyone.
Thanks a lot.
With that, we've got Dr. Laurie, and I'm going to say her last name, Deutsch.
Right.
Amelia.
Hi.
Thank you
Yeah.
for being here with us tonight, Laurie.
Thank you. I'm a doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine with a specialty in functional medicine in Great Barrington. I am one of the canaries in the mine. I'm highly sensitive to electromagnetic frequencies. Some years ago, using my first cell phone, which was a flip phone while I was driving, an intense electric shock went through my hand as I was holding the phone, and I instinctively threw the phone on to the other side of the car. And that was my first lesson on how dangerous these things are. Now, with the iPhone, people often ask me to do FaceTime, and I say no, because FaceTime in particular, it feels like it's burning my face. I have a similar experience with my iPhone on speaker. Even if it's 3 feet away, I can still feel the energy. At some point, I feel an urgent need to get off the phone. The radiation seems to be building up in my body and I can't take it anymore. I don't feel well. All my cells are vibrating in a weird, I don't know how to even describe the vibration. I feel fatigue and some brain fog. Those sensations die down over time, but what is it doing in the long run? It does not feel safe. I have patients with various health issues, headaches, anxiety, insomnia, gut and hormonal issues, asthma, you name it. I mean, there's just so many things going on with people. Who knows how much of any ailment might be caused or exacerbated by radiation technology? Inflammation is involved with most health issues. How much of this technology is causing inflammation? I can feel the fire and move away from it, at least for now. But what about people, especially children, who can't feel the energy but are exposed to it? We have thousands of studies showing harm. We are calling for adherence to this independent research, along with public education to raise awareness of this important issue. We need a registry to document those who have electromagnetic sensitivity, and we need protection from sources of exposure that we cannot control. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laurie, so much for being an incredible medical practitioner who knows about this, who has lived experience about this, and who is calling for policy change, protections, and a registry because of this. Thank you. And Virginia can't speak, so Cece is going to read Virginia's statement next.
Thank you so much, Courtney. And thank you to Virginia. We're sorry you were having technical difficulties tonight. And I'm so grateful to everybody who prepared their statements and sent them to me. So if we had a glitch like this, we could still represent you. So I'm speaking now on behalf of Virginia Rosen. She is a registered nurse and a holistic nurse for the environment. And she indicates she suffers from electromagnetic sensitivity and multiple chemical sensitivity. Her EHS or EMS started back in 2019, and it was triggered by something that we haven't discussed yet tonight. There were newly installed LED lighting in the common areas of her residence, and she experienced sudden onset with no warning from the private management, HUD subsidized housing that she lived in. Her symptoms felt like lightning rod strikes in each eye, felt like there was a ramrod shoved into the back of her throat and into the epigastric region of her abdomen. She had imminent vomiting sensation, and it felt like there was a 9/11 cloud catapulting behind her with every light, especially the motion sensors. So what did she do? She sought medical care. The retina specialist says, oh, you have normal retinas and a healthy lifestyle, and referred her to a neuro-ophthalmologist who said, wear yellow lenses, which didn't help. Referred her to a mind-body medical institute that indicated there's nothing we can do for you. And then she went to a LED specialist who wrote a letter to ask for LED-free housing. And the optometrist also prescribed polarized sunglasses. But this experience clearly demonstrates the source of her severe EHS, and it's recurring with every LED and CFL light bulb that she encounters. So prior to those lights, which have seriously exacerbated her medical condition, she was doing okay. She does wear medically necessary polarized sunglasses and a hood to cover her eyes when leaving or entering her residence. She has these same problems on our public transportation system and all sites that use that type of technology. So she hopes her story resonates with others, including legislators and policy advocacy. And what she wants them to do is to first set policies that do no harm, and then follow the guidelines suggested in the scientific literature. So Virginia, thank you again for being with us tonight and for submitting your statement. Back to you, Courtney.
Thank you, Cece, and thank you, Virginia. Next up, we have Laurie Wodin of Upton.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. Thank you all for sharing your stories and teaching us all so much. I am from Upton, Massachusetts, and I have been educating my community about EMFs through educational forums and cable shows. We had a winning vote at town meeting to put a pause on 5G until the FCC addressed the outdated public radiation exposure limits. We had a majority, I should say, but we needed 2/3. We didn't get that. So we're going to go back to working on setbacks in the bylaws, hopefully, of regulations on our polls. We continue to educate, and on Monday, June 26th at 6:30, all are invited to join us for an in-person screening of the award-winning film Generations Z. Details are on the events page at Massachusetts for Safe Technology. Thank you, Cece. Next, I would like to share a statement for a friend who cannot be on this technology because of her condition being so severe. Here are her words. My name is Christine Daddario of Milford, Massachusetts. In July of 2020, while on my computer working at United Way of Tri-County, I began to experience horrible symptoms: migraine, chest pain, confusion, extreme body pain, and burning sensations throughout my body. When my symptoms began, stronger Wi-Fi was being installed everywhere. I would remove myself from emissions and my symptoms would disappear, only to return again when I was around a cell phone, cell tower, router, or computer. I had been healthy prior to this, and after a day of particularly bad symptoms at work, I suffered a miscarriage. A Kaiser Permanente study concludes non-ionizing radiation more than doubles the risk of miscarriage. My doctor diagnosed me with microwave syndrome, and I have not been able to work for a year. I have a hard time going out because cell towers are everywhere. I can hardly communicate with friends and family. It's a very, very lonely existence. I'm only 38 years old. My life had so much promise. Now I am mostly confined to 2 rooms of my home where the radiation intrusions are less strong. I thought I'd visit Wells, Maine for a weekend to experience the healing powers of the sea for which it's known. Instead, when I got there, I began to experience symptoms far worse than any I'd ever experienced. My radiation meter readings were higher than I'd ever seen before. I was forced to return home that day, and a friend there informed me that during 2020, 5G had been installed on every telephone pole, even at the beach. There was no escape for me, and I realized that soon I wouldn't be able to go anywhere without debilitating symptoms. Thousands of others Thousands of others already experienced the same symptoms and many more if we don't stop the 5G rollout? How could people not realize that the radiation, which has affected soldiers for so long, isn't an enormous problem that we all have to be paying attention to and that we all will be struggling with before long? Thank you so much for this opportunity to share a little bit of mine, but mostly Christine's story.
Laurie, thank you for sharing yours and Christine's stories. They're powerful stories, and we need to hear those stories. We need to hear the scientific studies behind them, and then the real live lived experience and the consequences for that exposure, because it's tragic. And when we share this, we educate others, and we hope that there are things that we can do to make it better, whether in our own personal life and our choices to use things that are hardwired and reduce exposures, or to ask our legislators and community leaders to make decisions that make it safer for everyone. So thank you.
I think there are tens of thousands of people who have stories just like Christine's. It's heartbreaking.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And if we can educate and prevent just one, then we make a difference in the world. Thank you. Next up, we have Amy Judd, and she is sharing a letter on behalf of her friend who is Trilby Miller, who couldn't be here with us tonight. Trilby is a nurse and has a really important story to share, and I want to thank Amy for using her powerful voice. Amy is an educator and advocate in her own right, standing up for people who have electromagnetic sensitivity, safer siting of cell towers. And thank you for sharing Trilby's story tonight. Let's see if we can find Amy. Amy, thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you. I'm happy to be here. So anyway, again, my name is Amy Judd. I live in Lenox, Massachusetts. My friend Trilby is a nurse who, along with all of us, is very concerned about EMF, EHS. She couldn't be here, so I would like to share her letter with you. As a nurse who has spent my entire career educating others about disease prevention, I conclude that our town leaders would be best served to look at published studies about health effects of wireless radiation. I have a BS in nursing and have dedicated my career to working with children. I am aware of the risks associated with wireless radiation. The American Academy of Pediatrics, the Environmental Working Group, and the National Toxicology Institute have validated these risks. There is an environmental health nursing chapter dedicated to wireless radiation, which calls for reduction in exposure due to children's smaller bodies and thinner skulls absorbing more RF radiation. My granddaughter experienced hypersensitivity issues when she was an infant, and I have concerns about the damage caused to her by this exposure. Psychiatric nurses who work with youth will tell you that anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, ADD, ADHD, oppositional defiance, and other mental health issues have exponentially increased since 2002. These illnesses are a direct consequence of the proliferation of cell phone towers in our towns and cities. Our children and grandchildren are being exposed from multiple sources of wireless radiation beginning even before conception. It is well documented that higher RF exposures lead to 3 times higher the miscarriage rate and contribute to male infertility. Children's cancers are on the rise, as is diabetes. There is a link between RF and memory loss, also called digital dementia, and people in their 40s are being diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Dr. Linda Birnbaum, former director of the National Institute of Environmental Health Science and National Toxicology Program, states a mounting body of published studies associate radiofrequency radiation with adverse negative health effects. FCC limits need to be strengthened and to protect the public, especially children and vulnerable populations, from long-term exposures. Living next to a cell tower is a long-term exposure. Dr. Birnbaum was a toxicologist and a microbiologist. We must listen to the experts when they speak about biological harm. The FCC was mandated by the court to do just that in August 2021, and it has failed to comply. Town leaders and legislators must not ignore experts and published medical science. Sincerely, Trilby Miller, RN, BSN. Thank you.
Amy, thank you so much for sharing that. And it's everyday people who share their stories, and it's our nurses and our frontline workers. It's our holistic health professionals, our doctors, subject matter experts who are speaking out because they see this in their patient population and want to prevent other people from going down that road as well with these kind of preventative measures. So thank you so much for giving Trilby a voice this evening and sharing her powerful words.
Thank you for letting me read her letter.
Thank you. And last but not least, we have Dr. Paul Heroux, who I would like to welcome.
Thank you very much, Courtney.
Thank you.
For those who don't know me, I am a professor at McGill University, where I teach a course in health effects of electromagnetism. And the reason why I want to intervene tonight is that I just saw a letter from a French association called Robin des Toits, dated the 7th of June of this year. And it's a letter concerning the strategic orientation report for an environmental health law, obviously, which is being discussed in France. And what Robin des Toits does not agree with is the following. They don't agree with designating electrohypersensitivity as a pathology and electrohypersensitive people as sick people. And I think I agree with that completely. It is not you who are sick. It is the environment that is sick, and it is made sick by an industry that is either non-caring or ignorant. I'd also like to ask Jodie, who was there earlier. She says that she had tinnitus before, but electromagnetic radiation is at a different frequency, she says. I'm very interested in the details of this because I also happen to teach hearing conservation at McGill. So if she could contact me, I would be very grateful. Thank you.
For the tinnitus that I have in my ears, I had an injury in my inner ear when I was a child, so I've always had ringing in my ears. But the frequencies are much higher and they're pulsed. So it's different than the tinnitus that I've had all my life. I'm in my early 50s, so I mean, I've had tinnitus since I was probably around 7. So the difference in the frequencies, the change in the frequencies that I've noticed since all these towers and antennas have gone up is, you know, it's a different frequency. So I know it's not tinnitus.
Could you describe the pulsation that you're talking about? I'm sure it's not the pulsation of the electromagnetic pulses themselves, or at what frequency is this pulsation?
It's a very high pitched frequency, almost like, it's really hard to describe. It's just very, very high. And sometimes it's just a straight sound, and other times it kind of, you know, it pulses a little bit. But it's very, very high. It's almost like with a dog whistle, how the frequencies go really, really high. It's almost that kind of a frequency.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Dr. Heroux, thank you so much for being here. I had a question for you, which is, what would you like our legislators and leaders here in Massachusetts to know about electromagnetic sensitivity, and what would you like to see them do here besides passing the MAVEN registry of harm to document the number of people here in the Commonwealth with this condition? Is there anything else that you would recommend?
Well, I think that the experts on helping legislation along in Massachusetts seems to be Cece. On my part, I am trying to develop I would say a stream of thought that would lead to a standard that would solidify the recognition of the electro-hypersensitive condition based on a very specific criteria. In other words, we want something quantitative. to make these cases more convincing. And we have to look into the science that has been used, for example, in ionizing radiation to build up that kind of structure that will convince people in the courts that this is something real. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think we'll turn it back over to Cece.
Yes, thank you, folks. I have opened up the chat. If anybody would like to pop a question in, you're welcome to. Sheena, Dr. Havas was making the suggestion that perhaps you could speak for a moment on the work that you've been doing about ACT. Would you have a moment to share that with us?
Sure. I was also going to say too, if anybody needs help in achieving access to hospitals, I've had some success of 10 hospitals here in Ontario and a couple in Alberta, providing access to those who are EHS, including a 5-week inpatient cancer treatment. So I really love to help advocate for those of you that, you know, it's just easier to advocate for somebody else. And so I'd be happy to do that for any of you that that need that in a doctor's office or a hospital or a dentist office, that kind of thing. The act that Magda's talking about is called auricular chromotherapy, and it's a light therapy that I was trained on in 2019 that with the research that Dr. Havas has done, she's found that physiologically people get into a state of flight and fight with exposure, particularly to wireless technology. So she's documented that with the heart rate variability monitoring. And sometimes, in addition to that physiological state of flight and fight, there can be a psychological component of flight and fight. And so sometimes if there is some trauma, some psychological trauma, it exacerbates some of the responses. And people are a bit reluctant when I start talking about that because I think I'm saying things are all in their heads, and it's not like that. It's that your body has sensed a strong stress of some sort, and it can be physiologically, and there can be some psychological component. So there's this light therapy that Dr. Havas and I are starting research on, and it's just shining yellow light on the acupuncture points of the ear associated with memory and your limbic system. So it actually really easily eliminates trauma for a very, very simple approach. And I've been training doctors now for a few years. I originally talked about it at the EMF Medical Conference. And so I have a free training the third Friday of every month, if anybody's interested, at the Electrosensitive Society. And also for those of you that are electrosensitive, I have a weekly support group where we meet online. A lot of people join by phone because they can't be on the computer. It's open to everyone. There's a lot of people from North America, some from Europe. Everybody's welcome. So Sheena at Electrosensitive Society is my email, and I'll put it in the chat. Thank you for doing this, all of you. And I just appreciate your time and your commitment and your energy and your care for all of those who are really, really struggling.
Sheena, thank you so much for being here tonight and sharing, hosting that support group and being an advocate for so many of us. I know you have done presentations for, for my children to the Board of Health as well about this condition. Really powerful videos. We'll make sure that we link to those so people can share those with their legislators and leaders about electrosensitivity. And also thank you for dealing with the issues of the trauma, because I think we've all been traumatized by our experiences with this, and anything that we can do to reduce the stress, build resiliency. And I know that starts first and foremost with the recognition of how many of us there are, and what our lived experiences are and how we can make it better. So I want to thank you all for being here tonight, sharing the science, sharing your stories, sharing the policy changes and protections you'd like to see here in the Commonwealth and throughout the world, sharing resources, and sharing this time with each other on Global Electrosensitivity Day, June 16th. Thank you.
All right, Courtney, thank you so very much for your gracious hosting this evening. I would like to close with just asking folks, if you're not already on our mailing list at Massachusetts for Safe Technology, please go out there and join us when there are action items where we can help one another in our communities. We will send out notices, and that really is how we raise our voices together. So again, blessings to everybody who took the time to join us, and especially to those who are suffering from this horrible illness. And we are just trying our best to get things lined up where you will have safe places to live, work, play, educate, and worship. So thank you, everybody. Have a blessed evening. And until next time, have a tech safe day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good
Thank
night,
you, Cece and
everyone.
Courtney and Amelia. Take care.
Please save the chat.
Yes.
Yes.
We're
Bye,
all trying to.
everyone.
You can save the chat by going down to the bottom of the chat and click on the ... and it will
Not
give you
there.
the option to save.
Mhm.
Okay, I see them usually. Oh, there they are.
On the
Okay.
phone, you don't see it.
Very good, Eleanor. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
for
so
putting
much.
this
Well
on,
done.
Cece.
Well done. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks for putting this on.
You
Yes,
betcha.
thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
being
Thank
with
you,
us,
Dr.
Scott.
Nagy, everybody. Thank you very much.
Everybody.